Well, U.S. cities are dealing with these protests. The country today turned its attention to Dallas, Texas, and a key moment for President Obama. For 7.5 years, our nation's first black president has found himself at the epicenter of the stories involving race and justice in America, at times in part based on his own words, such as suggesting wrongly early on in his presidency that police acted stupidly by arresting a prominent black Harvard professor following a confrontation at that professor's home. You may recall that resulted in the so-called beer summit between the president, Vice President Biden, Professor Henry Louis Gates, the man who had been confronted by police, and Cambridge Police Sergeant James Crowley. Then there was President Obama's decision to insert himself into the controversy surrounding the fatal shooting of Trayvon Martin in Florida, saying, quote, "If I had a son, he looked like Trayvon." 2 years later, the president would inject his administration again into a legal matter, the shooting case involving Michael Brown and police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, sending in his Justice Department and dozens of FBI agents, even enlisting the help of the fiery activist Reverend Al Sharpton, who helped perpetuate the story that Michael Brown, who was black, died with his hands up begging for his life. A story that turned out to be a blatant lie, which Al Sharpton refuses to admit to this day. Then 5 days ago, 5 police officers were gunned down by a madman who not only hated cops, but specifically said he wanted to target white cops. And at the memorial service for those fallen officers today, President Obama again stepped into the breach.
These men and their families shared a commitment to something larger than themselves. They weren't looking for their names to be up in lights. They tell you the pay was decent, but wouldn't make you rich. They could have told you about the stress and long shifts. And they probably agree with Chief Brown when he said that cops don't expect to hear the words thank you very often, especially from those who need them the most. That in this country, we don't have soldiers in the streets or militias setting the rules. Instead, we have public servants, police officers, like the men who were taken away from us.
Across social media, those remarks were widely praised. Even some of Mr. Obama's harshest critics found praise for the tone and message of the first 10 minutes of his remarks. But then the speech took a turn. Watch.
Race relations have improved dramatically in my lifetime. Those who deny it are dishonoring the struggles that helped us achieve that progress. But we know but America, we know that bias remains, although most of us do our best to guard against it and teach our children better. None of us is entirely innocent. No institution is entirely immune. And that includes our police departments. As a society, we choose to underinvest in decent schools. We allow poverty to fester so that entire neighborhoods offer no prospect for gainful employment. We flood communities with so many guns that it is easier for a teenager to buy a Glock than get his hands on a computer or even a book.
Joining us now, Britt Hume, our Fox News senior political analyst. There you were on Special Report last night, Britt, calling out the president for doing exactly this, and you walked us through, the Ferguson case and the Trayvon Martin case. And the question is whether he just did it again.
Well, I must say, I want to add my voice to those who thought the first part of the president's speech was just terrific. He was eloquent. He struck the right tone. His message was strong and clear. The tribute to the police officers seemed heartfelt and moving. And my thought was, this is Barack Obama at his best, at his most eloquent. This is him putting his oratorical skills, which can be considerable, to the best use. But I, like you, was struck by the turn that he made, and especially by that last comment that he made that you showed on the air, where he said, that it'd be easier for a teenager to get a Glock pistol than to get a gun or even a book. Now that's nonsense. but it was in furtherance of the agenda that he was talking about spending in the inner cities, about gun control and all the rest of it. And I was frankly disappointed that he chose to go in that direction. You know, the president has a problem in the sense that to him, I think, racism in America has a white face, never a black face. And that's why you heard him say in the aftermath of the hideous murders of the policeman in Dallas that we might never be able to untangle the motives of the shooter. The shooter's motives were perfectly clear. He said them in his conversations with the police, that he wanted to kill police, he wanted to kill white people. I'm not saying the president would deny that that's what he said, but the president's reaction to it suggests that he glosses over these sorts of things. The same way, Megan, that when it comes to the hideous violence against blacks, black-on-black violence in cities like Chicago and Baltimore and others, the president has been virtually silent on that issue, though far more black lives are lost in that way than are ever lost to incidents involving police shootings.
I want to talk to you about that, but just on the memorial service today, I mean, we've talked about President Obama's responsibility to sometimes be comforter-in-chief, and how he has at times shirked that. When we've had Americans get beheaded, the president saying, okay, I'm going off to play golf, and making a passing remark, from Martha's Vineyard, in a way that feels like, wait, whoa, I don't know if he gets it. I don't know if he understands. The night after Benghazi, and our 4 Americans killed, he had a fundraiser, and now here today at the memorial service, like, okay, he's got an anti-gun thing, or at least a push to change the confines or redefine them of the Second Amendment at the memorial service for the dead cops?
Yeah, that's obviously the real question here. Is the president is entitled to his policy preferences, and he's entitled to his views, and he has plenty of opportunity as a man with the biggest megaphone in the country and perhaps the world to express them. It is a good question whether it's appropriate to do so in a memorial service like this, and especially after he's already paid splendid tribute to these fallen officers in a way that obviously the audience in the hall greatly appreciated, and I think the country appreciated. I'm at a little bit of a loss to explain why he decided to turn in the direction he turned, but he did.
We've talked about President Obama's responsibility to sometimes be comforter-in-chief, and how he has at times shirked that. When we've had Americans get beheaded, the president saying, okay, I'm going off to play golf, and making a passing remark, from Martha's Vineyard, in a way that feels like, wait, whoa, I don't know if he gets it. I don't know if he understands. The night after Benghazi, and our 4 Americans killed, he had a fundraiser, and now here today at the memorial service, like, okay, he's got an anti-gun thing, or at least a push to change the confines or redefine them of the Second Amendment at the memorial service for the dead cops?
Yeah, that's obviously the real question here. Is the president is entitled to his policy preferences, and he's entitled to his views, and he has plenty of opportunity as a man with the biggest megaphone in the country and perhaps the world to express them. It is a good question whether it's appropriate to do so in a memorial service like this, and especially after he's already paid splendid tribute to these fallen officers in a way that obviously the audience in the hall greatly appreciated, and I think the country appreciated. I'm at a little bit of a loss to explain why he decided to turn in the direction he turned, but he did.
To what extent do you think he has the power to influence the debate? Because we've been talking a lot this week about language and whether chants like, what do we want dead cops, when do we want them now, influences somebody like this crazed shooter in Dallas or the next potential shooter. And not to put the blame on the president at all, but to what extent do his words influence the discussion and the tone in the country?
Well, look at it this way, Megan. These cases in which Black Lives Matter has become so prominent, particularly the shooting in Ferguson, the Michael Brown case. That is what gave Black Lives Matter its impetus. The president's sympathy for that movement and some of the beliefs that it espoused. Look at, for example, at the very name of the group, Black Lives Matter. Now, I heard one journalist the other day, or saw one journalist write that people didn't seem to get that what that meant really was Black Lives Matter too. Who doubts that? I don't think there are many white people in America at all who don't think that Black Lives Matter. It's just that they believe that all other lives matter as well. Nobody Nobody is of the view that the black lives that are lost in America don't matter. The premise, the name of the group, I think, is a fallacy, but the president has supported it. And there's no way to know with any certainty to what extent the president's seeming approval of this idea gives legitimacy to the kinds of hideous acts that we've seen, in Dallas and some other places, and now it seems perhaps might have been attempted in Baton Rouge had it not been stopped. So that is the question. There's no way to know the answer for sure, but it strikes me that it ought to be very clear to the president and to other leaders in this country that you need to be very careful in what you say and be sure your facts are sound and that you're balanced about it.
Hillary Clinton went out and had a meeting with the mother of Michael Brown, and holding Michael Brown up as a victim, which has been proven to be false. He was the aggressor on Officer Darren Wilson. Officer Wilson was the potential victim, and he fought back to save his life. And Hillary Clinton, like Reverend Al, does not seem to have yet come to accept that reality. Britt, good to see you.
Thanks, Megan.